Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're continuing with our conversation about the Shpoler Zeide and Rebbe Nachman. And again, with all of the prerequisite introductions, that all of this is B'derech Efshar and B'derech Tfila, that we're not trying to lay claim to what exactly was taking place between these two tzaddikim, but rather we're trying to uncover a certain lumdus, a certain narrative structure that enables us to see this historic machlokas in a new lens. And through seeing it in a new lens, we have the ability to retroactively look back on all of the misinterpretations and all of the mistaken assumptions and look at it in a new light. The goal of all of this is to awaken what the Rebbe Shlita describes as the schleik na'eh, as this wondrous laughter that's going to emerge, specifically by way of the collision of opposites. Part of the nature of machlokas tzadikim, and we started talking about this in the previous year, is that it's not simply that, oh, it looks like there's a machlokas, but in truth, there's no machlokas. Because then it might as well have been that there should have been no apparent machlokas to begin with. If we see an apparent machlokas, and we see an apparent contradiction or collision or discrepancy, we have to have the operating belief that the collision is for a further purpose, that it's not just for us to say, no, there's no machlokas, but rather our job is to uncover the innermost point of the machlokas. If there appears to be the dynamics of conflict, those dynamics of conflict are there to reveal something new. And the place that we uncover this is ultimately when we look at the Arizal. In the teachings of the Arizal and Shar HaAkudim, the Arizal is describing the emergence of vessels, the emergence of containment vessels that hold the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The question, however, is that if everything started off as light, so then how could it be that vessels emerge? And what the Arizal describes over there is the process of a batisha, a collision, that there is a collision between two types of light. And as a result of the collision between these two types of light, each element of light that is colliding with the other is now forced to uncover certain potencies that could not have been revealed within it other than by way of the collision. Just like the collision of atoms that reveal a potency greater than themselves, specifically by way of the collision, something that could not have been revealed had they been standing in their own isolation. So too, when we look at machlokas l'shem shamayim, what we're talking about is the collision of two spiritual potencies that have latent kochos hidden within them, but because there's no resistance and there's no gevura that forces it to reveal that which is hidden within it, so they remain in their own self-contained isolation. Specifically, when there's a collision, when one thing hits the other, it causes each part to reveal the full potency of self, as well as the third element that comes about as the way of the collision, the sparking that takes place between two items that are in friction with one another, that when they come in contact with one another, they uncover a hitherto unrevealed koach. This betisha, this collision, this colliding with one strength and another strength awakens a new potency. And this is the secret of the machlokas of the tzaddikim. It appears that there's a collision. It appears that there's a battle. It appears that there is two elements that are in opposition to one another. But in truth, what's really being revealed is the emergence of a new power that could not have been revealed without this collision. Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov explains this in a beautiful remez that we've touched on before, that the word batash, Beis Tes Shin, which means collision, when looked at in its isolation, spells out the Roshei Tevos of bitachon, tova, and simcha, trust, goodness, and joy. That anytime we encounter a collision in our own lives, and especially in the narrative of the great tzaddikim, we have to believe that with bitachon, with the trust of the collision for the sake of unification, that there's going to be tova and shalom and simcha that's going to come out of it, that there's going to be goodness that comes out of it. This is Trei Ksuvim Hamachishim Zeh Zeh Ad Sheyavo HaKasuv HaShlishi V'Yechriu B'neihem. This is the element of the two psukim that seem to stand in stark opposition to one another, waiting for that third pasuk to come along and to reveal the unity from within both of these opposites. This is the secret of Machlokas L'Shem Shamayim, and this is the secret of all of the fundamental machloksim, which are rooted in what we described as the machlokas between Chokhmah and Binah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created two kochos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed two kochos, the koach of Chokhmah and the koach of Binah. Chokhmah, we said, operates in pure unity, It's ayin, it's nothingness. It wants to remain above in the realms of clarity. It doesn't want to descend down into the territory of disclarity and concealment. Bina, on the other hand, understanding, which is the source of differentiation, has no problem descending down into constriction and concealment. That's what it's made for. But what it has a harder time doing is operating within that space of utterly pure unity. So Chokhmah and Binah, or Chokhmah representing the right brain or the expansive brain, and Binah representing the left brain or the constrictive brain, Chokhmah and Binah collide with one another. There's a machlokas between Chokhmah and Binah. This expresses itself as well in the machlokas between Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, which we're going to see. But the machlokas between Chokhmah and Binah is the source of all machlokas. That's the two ksuvim. Those are the two psukim that stand in stark opposition. The kasuv hashlishi sheyachriu beinehem, that third pasuk that is going to come and unify that machlokas, is going to be the light of Keser. And like we said, Chokhmah stands in opposition to Bina. Chokhmah is ayin, it's nothingness. Bina is yesh, it's somethingness. And Keser, which is that third pillar that's going to be awoken and emerge from within the collision of these two contradictory elements of self and existence, is going to be the light of Keser. What's the light of Keser? The light of Keser is a unification and a unity of Chokhmah and Bina, where both the nothingness of Chokhmah and the somethingness of Bina are now operating in unison to reveal the wondrous capacity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to reveal himself all the way up above in the territory of Chokhmah and all the way down below in the territory of Bina. So all machlokas is rooted in Chokhmah and Bina, the machlokas between Chokhmah and Bina, but ultimately the purpose of the machlokas between Chokhmah and Bina is to reveal the light of Keser. That's going to be the collision that creates this third central pillar that reveals something greater than what Chokhmah or Bina can reveal on its own. And we described last week that the Shpoler Zeide, or 2 days ago we described that the Shpoler Zeide represents the concept or the quality of Chokhmah, and Rebbe Nachman represents the concept or the quality of Bina. The Shpoler Zeide, with his Chokhmah, only wanted to function in a clear and clarified space of spiritual clarity, of a conversation directly with God, not taking into consideration all of the vicissitudes and the struggles of what it means to human being. And Rabbi Nachman schlepped the entire spiritual process, the entire spiritual endeavor, into the territory of struggle, into the territory of constriction. One of the ways in which this appears is that the Shpoler Zeide, for example, was a person who was able to be poyel nisim. The nisim that the Shpoler Zeide was revealing were nisim on the level of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, because a nes is rooted in Chokhmah. It's a shattering of the Teva. Teva, the laws of nature, the constrictive elements of what this worldly experience looks like, that's all rooted in Bina, all of the changes of Bina. A nes is something that ascends out of the shiftings and the changings of Bina, and it awakens this primordial light of Chokhmah to illuminate the nothingness of godliness upon the world and shatter the concepts of Teva. The Shpoler Zeide was Melumid Benisim. The Shpoler Zeide was actively engaged in being Poyel Nisim and being Poyel Yeshuos for Yidden throughout the land, before he became a tzaddik in a revealed way, and especially in the time that he was engaged in his wanderings prior to becoming a revealed tzaddik. The Shpoler Zeide would call upon Nisim. He would call to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, bring this Yid a refuah because a Yid needs a refuah. Bring this Yid money because a Yid needs money. There was no demand for the Yid to do anything in order to earn the money. There was no demand for the Yid to do anything in order to gain that refuah. It was simply by dint of the fact that according to the illuminated infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way things should be is that they should be good for the Yidden, revealed good. The law of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's governance in this world is that he wants to bestow good upon creation, and the Shpoler Zeide, as the Merkava of Chokhmah, demanded that goodness to be revealed. Rabbi Nachman, on the other hand, was the realm of Bina. The realm of Bina is not the realm of Nisim, it's the realm of Teva. It's the realm of engaging with this worldly nature. It's the battle of this worldly nature, entering into all of the shifting colors and the shifting patterns of what it means to human being. Rabbi Nachman, we don't see nearly anywhere that he spoke of moifsim. We don't see that Rabbi Nachman was poel nisim in a revealed way that was unrelated to human effort. Adrabah, Ibcham Mastaber, we see that Rabbi Nachman demands a profound, profound element of yigia, of effort, tefillah, davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And yes, davening is the nace for Rebbe Nachman, that when a person davens and when a person enters into that mindset of encountering HaKadosh Baruch Hu within their own lives, of davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from within their own limited space, that's what changes the hashgacha. That's what brings down a shinoi teva. It's not something that comes all the way from above without the effort of the human being. Adarabah, it's something that comes about specifically by way of the effort of the human being. Because Chokhmah wants to shatter the roles of teva. It wants to bring about fundamental nisim that reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu immediately, as opposed to the realm of Binah, which is the opposite of nisim, but it's entering into teva itself, entering into what it means to be a human being, and uncovering the secret of tefillah, uncovering the secret of the effort necessary to draw down nisim in my life, to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in places that I didn't think I could find him, and that's how I uncover the nisim through the path of Binah. So we see that these frequencies of Chokhmah and Binah can reflect themselves in many, many, many of the differentiations and the shifts between the Shpoler Zeide and Rebbe Nachman. The Shpoler Zeide representing the realm of Chokhmah and ease, and Rebbe Nachman representing the realm of Binah and processing. This reveals itself in the way that a person relates to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Shpoler Zeide has a song, Kol Bayar. Kol Bayar Anochi Shomaya. It became a very popular, beautiful Chabad nigun that was sang by various Farbringans, by the Rebbeim. That Kol Bayar is a song of HaKadosh Baruch Hu crying out to Klal Yisrael, the lost child in a darkened forest. That there's a voice that comes from above, the voice of the Father, the voice of Chokhmah, that's seeking out Klal Yisrael. It's the light of above coming down to try and find receptacles that can hold it. It's that light of Chokhmah that's descending from above to below. Kol baya'ar anochi shomea. There's a voice in the forest that I hear, and it's the voice of a father that's crying out to his son, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu crying out to Klal Yisrael, asking on when they're going to return. So it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu reaching out for Klal Yisrael, as opposed to the voice in the forest that Rebbe Nachman came to cultivate, which is the voice of Hisbodedus, when a person goes out into the forest on their own. But here it's a very different voice. It's an inverted voice. It's not the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming down to the Jewish people, but it's the opposite. It's the voice of the Jewish people going up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That the Kol B'Ya'ar of the Shpoler Zeide on the level of Chokhmah is the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinitude coming down here below to fix everything. The light of Rebbe Nachman's Kol B'Ya'ar of Hisbodedus is from within the constriction of the human being, by way of the definitions and the separations that are imparted as a result of Bina, that crying out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from within my own lave, about my own struggles, about my own processes, and being mitboded with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the forest, that's the voice of Klal Yisrael going back up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we see, again, these reflections. Chachma is the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming down to Bnei Yisrael, and Bina is the voice of Bnei Yisrael going up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so we see that these inverted processes are reflective of that singular machlokes of Chokhmah and Binah. Now, we said that the goal of the machlokes between Chokhmah and Binah is to reveal the light of Keser. But it doesn't go straight from Chokhmah and Binah up to Keser. First and foremost, Chokhmah and Binah have to be expressed down here below. The tachlis of all things is for the light above to come down and express itself in Malchus. Malchus, for all intents and purposes, based on what we're talking about, is the way in which we perceive reality on the ground as Yidden, based on the belief system that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mashpia Shefa, is allowing existence to come into itself, unfold into itself, reveal itself in each and every moment, from the uppermost realms of nothingness down to the lowest territories of Yesh, through the entire process of the unfolding Seder Hashtalshalos. The goal is to reveal itself in Malchus. What is Malchus? Malchus is revelation. Malchus is that which is revealed. It is the turning outwards of an inner process. It is the point at which the entire system of processes reaches its final stage, and it congeals itself and it appears externally. That's why this worldliness can be referred to as Malchus, or in our own individual lives, if we trace the pattern of the spheros in our own inner consciousness, Malchus is manifestation. Malchus is the unfolding of all of the inner processes. Malchus expresses herself in two ways. Everything in the world expresses itself in two ways. The reason that everything in the world expresses itself in two ways is because everything shares a root both in Chokhmah as well as in Binah. And if Chokhmah and Binah are opposites, then there's also going to have to be an oppositional expression within Malchus itself, which is the outgrowth of Chokhmah and Binah. Now, obviously, these dual sides of Chokhmah and Binah, which express themselves in Malchus, are really rooted in the paradox of opposites operating at once of Keser, but we're not up to that yet. So Chokhmah and Binah represent the two forms in which Malchus is going to express itself. Chokhmah wants to engage with the Pnimius of Malchus, and Binah wants to engage in the Chitzonius of Malchus. Now, forgive me for these complicated terms, but it's exactly the point that we're trying to make. Chachma, when it looks down at this world, when a Yid looks at this world from a perspective of Chachma, all it wants to look at is the Pnimius of Malchus. What does it mean to look at the Pnimius of Malchus? The Pnimius of Malchus is Malchus in its refinement. And Malchus in its refinement is the most potent form of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revelation. Because for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to reveal himself down here, within the constriction, means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to develop a deep bond and relationship with the way in which Malchus is going to be revealed. Because in order for it to be revealed down here, it has to have a profoundly potent form of infinite expression for it to continue to be revelatory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that interiority of Malchus is the Nekuda of the Shechina in its Pnimius. We know that the Shechinat Uzo Begoive Meromim, that even though the Shechina appears to be descending down into concealment and into constriction and into all forms of hiddenness as associated with the realm of Bina, in its inner core, at the inner Nakuda of Malchus, that a person has the ability to uncover within themselves by way of Mesiras Nefesh for Emuna, there's a secret of Mum Ein Bach. There's a secret of Shechinat Uzoy Begoivei Meroimim, and that the lowest manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in this world is in truth rooted in the highest. Malchuscha malchus kol elamim umem shaltacha b'chor dor vador. That your malchus, your revelation in this world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is rooted in the loftiest places. That malchus, even though it appears to be low, if we dig down deep into the inner interiority of it, what we'll come to find is the most potent form of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revelation. That's the pnimius of malchus. The tzaddikim who operate in accordance to Chokhmah, when they look at Malchus, when they look at this world, which is the manifestation of Malchus, the manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light, they don't see concealment, they don't see the Yerida, they don't see the fall into constriction and the poisonous nature of what it means to be stuck in Klippa. All they see is the luminosity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's illumination, the tachlis of all things, Shechinat Uzo Begoive Meroimim, Malchuscha Malchus Kaloilamim, that there's no problem, that there's no issues that need to be fixed, all that needs to be uncovered is the true nature of all things. That's how Chokhmah wants to reveal Malchus. It wants to uncover the pnimius of Malchus. Any situation that it finds itself in, it's one fell swoop that it just takes all of the concealment away and it runs back all the way up to the infinite nature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Malchus goes all the way back up. That's how Chokhmah wants to look at Malchus. Bina, on the other hand, doesn't look at the pnimius of Malchus. It doesn't look at the internal nature and the inner core of reality, which is in truth Einon Movado, in a revealed way. But rather, it looks at the chitzonius of Malchus. It looks at the way that Malchus appears to be revealed in this world. And the way that Malchus appears to be revealed in this world is something that is in need of profound rectification and clarification. That Malchus, yes, it may have started at the tippy top, but as it descends down through the Seder of Hishtalshelus, and once it reaches that point of Malchus to Atzilus, and then it goes down into the worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, into the nether realms of this worldly concealment and constriction, where there's Churban, and there's difficulty, and there's Golus HaShechina, and there's the pain and the suffering of Klal Yisrael. In that place, the tzaddikim of Bina are not looking at the inner quality of Malchus. They're not looking for that inner point that undoes all of the concealment and allows all of the system to go back up to absolute unity, but rather they are working with the constriction itself. All of the concealing garments that cover over the Nakuda of the Shekhinah, all of the birurim, all of the clarifications, all of the sifting, all of the rectifying, all of the tshuva, all of the davening, all of the hispoidedus, all of the effort and the struggle and the sweat and the toil that it takes to be a yid in this world. That's what Bina is looking at. Bina is looking at Chitzonius HaMalchus. It's looking at how Malchus appears. Not how Malchus is, but how Malchus appears. So Chokhmah looks at how Malchus is in its core, which is the innermost point of infinitude. And from their perspective, the tzaddikim of Chokhmah only want to uncover the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu without need for the human effort and the human toil. But the tzaddikim on the level of Bina They are aware that the innermost point of Malchus is the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but they want to work on the externalities of Malchus. They want to clarify Malchus within our own volitional behavior. They want to go down into the realm of Yegiya, into the realm of toil, into the realm of effort, in order to uncover the pure potency of Nishmas Yisrael and the rectifications that can take place by way of our engagement with concealment and constriction. It's only when both Panemius of Malchus and Chitzonius of Malchus are rectified that we're going to be able to ascend back up to Keser. But, like we said, one of the reasons that Chokhmah doesn't want to enter into the territory of Binah and doesn't want to engage with Chitzonius of Malchus is because the level of infinitude, the level of infinite light that Chokhmah carries cannot tolerate constriction. It cannot tolerate yeshus. It cannot tolerate the sense of entering into the egoisms of the self, because it's terrified that the moment that we enter into the mechanics of the self is the moment that we're going to forget about the nothingness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By Chokhmah, the avodah is bittul, and anything other than bittul is going to be seen as missing the point. And so to do anything other than to look at the innermost light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and be mevatel everything back up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to run the risk of getting caught up in the complications of selfhood. Masha'en Kain Bina, whose entire purpose is to emerge out of Chokhmah and to reveal that it has the opposite strength, Bina wants to go down into the Chitzonius of Malchus. Bina wants to clarify from within the constriction and within the concealment and within the Choshech HaKaful U'Mechupol, the doubled over darkness, and within the Hastara Shabatocha Hastara, and within the Milchama Sayetzer. Bina wants to go down into that place, because once Bina can go down into that place and reveal the light of Tshuva and Hispoidus and Simcha and Bitachon and the capacity of a Jew to utilize their Bechira to uncover the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's found within hidden places specifically, then when Bina goes back up, all the way back to Chokhmah, now it has something new to show. It has the ability to reveal that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light is not only found in the pure revelation of Chokhmah and the pure revelation of Bittul, but rather it can be found also in the Yagiya of Bina, in the Yagiya, in the effort, in the processing, and the struggles. That prior to the descent of Bina from Chokhmah, the assumption was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could only be found in absolute infinitude. But anything other than absolute infinitude would be a paradox and a contradiction to Hashem's light. And therefore, Bina and the tzaddikim of Bina take on this very difficult task, and they travel down this Gesher Tsar Ma'od Ma'od in order to enter into the territories of concealment for no reason other than to reveal that even in the darkness, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found there. Even in the constriction of Bina, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found there. And then, once the Panemius of Malchus has been rectified, as well as the Chitzonius of Malchus has been rectified, then there can be a true Aliyah to Malchus. Then Malchus can ascend back upwards, back through Bina, where it reveals its capacity to find revelation within constriction. Then it goes back into Chokhmah, which is the memory that it finds itself in Bittul. But now it can go all the way up to Keser, which is that which holds the paradox, which is that Hashem is found above in Chokhmah and below in Bina as well. That Hashem is found in revelation and Hashem is found in concealment. Chokhmah alone only reveals that Hashem can be found in revelation. Bina is the koach hanifla that has the ability to go down into constriction and reveal that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found in constriction as well. So the purpose of the machlokas between the tzaddikim on the level of Chokhmah and Bina is ultimately for the sake of clarifying Malchus, of going down into the territory of Malchus, going down into the territory of this worldliness, and revealing how both the clarity and the lack of clarity are both revelatory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light, and only with that can we go all the way up to the secret of Keser, which is Malchus HaGenuza Biradlo, which is the source of the highest potency of Malchus, which reveals Ani V'ayin B'Vasachas. This is exactly what we spoke about the journey to Eretz Yisrael. That prior to the journey to Eretz Yisrael, the Shpoler Zeide operated on the plane level of Chokhmah. And the plane level of Chokhmah is that ayin of Chokhmah that doesn't have to tolerate constriction because there's no such thing as constriction. And the Bina and the potentiation of Bina and the ability to descend down into constriction had not yet been revealed as a contradictory element. The journey of Rabbeinu to Eretz Yisrael was to awaken the latent potency of Bina from within Chokhmah and to drag Chokhmah down through Bina into the territories of constriction, into the Katna Shebekatnas, into the constriction by way of this machlokas now between Chokhmah and Bina. and then to come back up afterwards with the profound light of Ani ish pella v'nishmasi pella gadol, ish pella mafli la'asos, the secret of Keser Elyon Alav Nikra, which is the unity of Chokhmah and Binah, the Schoik Na'ah, that great laughter that is going to be uncovered when there's a unity between these two elements. This was the journey to Eretz Yisrael. Now, one of the places that this reveals itself most intensely is in what it means to be an Eved Hashem. How is a Jew meant to traverse the territory of this worldliness? Because in this world, down here, we encounter a splintering. We encounter, as we descend down into the territories of constriction, we begin to encounter the doubled nature of the self. The fact that the self has a nefesh habahamis and a nefesh elokus, that the soul has a Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer Tov. Chitzonius Hamalchus wants to engage in the Yetzer Hara. It wants to force the Yetzer Hara into the light. But Chokhmah doesn't want to deal with the Yetzer Hara. It doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that there's a Yetzer Hara. It just wants to look at the good. It doesn't want to pay attention to constriction. It just wants to look at that which is good. And this is one of the major places that we see a separation in the paths of the Shpoler Zeide and Rebbe Nachman. And it's rooted back in that secret of Kiddush Levana. Because as we said, Kiddush Levana is the rectification of the moon. The moon is Malchus. The moon in its highest root, on the level of Chokhmah, is equal to the sun, and the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found everywhere, equally revealed. But Bina says we have to schlep the moon down into its miyut halavana, where the moon descends, and gets stuck in all matters of constriction. And specifically from there, there's going to be an aliyah. And this could be part of the conversation that we started, which is that the machlokas began by Kiddush Levana. That when the Shpoler Zeide saw Rebbe Nachman making Kiddush Levana, he said, Nishta Zoi Nachman Leben, Nishta Zoi. That Nachman Leben means the lave is Bina. That the Shpoler Zeide was looking at the way that Rebbe Nachman was about to undergo the process of rectifying Malchus, meaning to say that the Shpoler Zeide, who only wanted to focus on the Panemius of Malchus, saw that Rebbe Nachman was preparing himself to go down into the exteriority of Malchus, into the constriction, and that's why he says, Nishta Zoi Nachman Leben Nishta Zoi. It's not like this. The path of Bina, Leben, the path of the heart, is too difficult. Because for the tzaddikim of Chokhmah, the threat that is encountered down here in worlds of constriction is not worth it. It's not worth it. They might as well stay upstairs in Chokhmah. To descend down into Bina, to run the risk of forgetting HaKadosh Baruch Hu for even a moment, is not worth it. And that's where there was a period of the Devekim. But ultimately what we're saying is this descent into the Chitzonius of Malchus is ultimately for a double descent, which is going to reveal that even the descent into the territories of constriction and concealment and personal work and the need to work on the self throughout the concealment of the self is ultimately going to bring about the most beautiful revelation, where Hashem is found both in the good parts of ourselves as well in the parts in which we struggle. The Shpoler Zeide makes numerous claims to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in numerous places about the Yetzer Hara. He did not want to acknowledge the Yetzer Hara. He did not want to acknowledge the fact that there was a part of the human self that was driven towards distraction, that was driven towards getting stuck, or that was schlepping itself down into the mud. All of the arguments that we see in the stories about the Shpoler Zeide to HaKadosh Baruch Hu are, what about if you revealed yourself and concealed your Yetzer Hara? What about if you hid your Yetzer Hara or Rebbeinu Shalom? If you tried to be a Jew for one day, you would see how difficult it is. So hide the Yetzer Hara and allow the Jewish people to work with a revealed Yetzer HaTov, and then you're going to see that ultimately all they want to do is to serve you. The Shpoler Zeide would take HaKadosh Baruch Hu to task. Literally, there's a frightening story of the Shpoler Zeide gathering together some of the biggest tzaddikim in the generation and closing themselves off in the room for 72 hours. Nobody allowed in and nobody allowed out. But the Shpoler Zeide ultimately took on the role of bringing HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Beis Din. The Klal Yisrael had found themselves in a place of such profound constriction, such hunger, such impoverishment of spirit, which for the level of Chokhmah is intolerable, because on the level of Chokhmah there should only be pure revelation. And what the Shpoler Zeide did is the Shpoler Zeide came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with an argument. The argument was that the families of the Jewish people were not being fed. The families of the Jewish people were not being given what they needed in order to find sustenance in this world. And the argument that the Shpoler Zeide has is as follows. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's a din that when a person is koina and eved ivri, when a master is koina, a Jewish slave, and the Jewish person has to work for that person, so then that Baal, the owner of the Jewish slave, is chayiv, is needing to pay, is acquired to pay, is required to pay for the food and the lounge of and the lodging of the family of the Eved Ivri. That it's a responsibility of the Baal to pay for the family of the Eved Ivri. Now, in this mashal for the Shpoler Zeide, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the Baal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the one who we were working for. We're the Eved Ivri. And what was happening is that the families of the Jewish people were not being fed. And so there was a din, there was a ta'aremes kavyachol on a Kadosh Baruch Hu kavyachol, which says that you're responsible to pay and to support the families of the Eved Ivri, which is us. And that's not happening. And the Shpoler Zeide then makes a claim, and he says, and if HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you want to tell me that the only time that the Baal is chayiv to pay the family of the Eved Ivri and to support the family of the Eved Ivri, which is the Jewish people, is when the Eved Ivri himself is accomplishing the tasks that the Baal wants him to accomplish, is when the slave is carrying out the tasks that the master wants him to accomplish, and you can make the claim that Klal Yisrael is not accomplishing what they need to do, and that we're not doing enough, and that's why we're undeserving of the Shefa. So then the Shpoler Zeide says as follows: HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's the reason we're not able to follow through on your will? It's because you gave us the Yetzer Hara. It's because you make it so difficult for us. And as a result of that, you have no taina that we're not able to carry out our tasks so that our families should be paid. Because the reason that we can't carry out the task is because of this Yetzer Hara that's blocking us all the time. And as a result of that, the Beis Din was Yotze, and it found Nishmas Yisrael Zakai. And from that moment forward, there was a Shefa Gadol that came to the people of the Shpoler Zeide. So we see the very arc of the Shpoler Zeide's argument is that the Yetzer Hara is what's blocking us. Take the Yetzer Hara away, take the Chitzonius HaMalchus away, reveal the Nefesh Elokus, and then we're fine. And this is revealed over and over when the Shpoler Zeide didn't want to deal with Tisha B'Av. He doesn't want to deal with Churban. We hinted to the story that there was a bris on Erev Tisha B'Av, and the Shpoler Zeide said, bring beer and more beer and more beer and more beer, to the point that by Tisha B'Av there was no one there because they were all asleep and they weren't able to say kinos and they weren't able to read Eicha and they weren't able to enter into that mournful place of Gullus and exile of the Shechina, etc., etc. And the Shpoler Zeide looks up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he says, you know what? We're done. We're not going to be asking anymore. There's not going to be people here to say kinos. The Yetzer Hara is too strong. We're drunk with the Yetzer Hara. Reveal Mashiach Tzidkenu himself, and then we'll be able to do tshuva. Then we'll be able to fix everything. This was the derech of the Shpoler Zeide. The Shpoler Zeide wanted to undo all constriction. He was the light of Avram Avinu. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh told him he would be like Avram Avinu. He would be like Avram Avinu, who would be the Zeide of the Jewish people, and Avram Avinu was chesed. He didn't want to look at bad whatsoever. He only wanted to look at the good. He only wanted to awaken a chesed gamor for Nishmas Yisrael. There was no tolerance of blaming the Jewish people. It was only that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hiding himself. This was the avodah of the Shpoler Zeide. Wanted to undo Tisha B'Av, wanted to undo the need to grapple with the constriction and the concealment and only reveal the illumination of the self. Like he said, Hashem, it's really, really, really hard to be a Jew. And if you want to know how hard it is, you try being a Jew for a day and you see what your Yetzer Hara is like. You see what the Yetzer Hara you've put in us is like, and then you'll understand why we can't do what we need to do. All of these different types of stories. The Shpoler Zeide was not interested in sharing Torah. Sharing Torah is a Bina-oriented thing. He says, I don't care about sharing Torah. I don't want to share Torah. I'm afraid that my Torah is going to get dragged down and it's going to get concealed. All I want to do is be Payal Nisim. All I want to do is feed other Yidden. And Ad Hayom, in the memory of one of the first Nisim that the Shpoler Zeide experienced, when he was still in exile, prior to his revelation, he was able, with one fell swoop, to pull a wagon that had fallen and gotten stuck, and he was able to pull it out of the mud in order to save the lives of Yidden. On that day, there's a commemorative Suda on Yud Teshuvas, where the Einiklach of the Shpoler Zeide celebrate this nace, and the way that they celebrate this nace is by feeding other Yidden. This is the light of the Shpoler Zeide, to feed other Yidden, to take from that empty sack like Rav Shaya Karastir, and to feed the Yidden, to feed them, just to be Mamshech Chasadim Gemurim, Chokhmah, to be Megale Pnimius HaMalchus, which is Mum Ein Bach. There's no claim against the Jewish people, there's no constriction against the Jewish people, and Nishmas Yisrael is a purified thing. That's the level of Chokhmah. The level of Binah, however, which is looking at Chitzonius HaMalchus, which is the Yetzer Hara itself, instead of denying the Yetzer Hara, instead of trying to push away the Yetzer Hara, the avodah of Binah is to transform the Yetzer Hara into a Malach Kadosh, to dig down deep in the territories of constriction and concealment and the battlefield of the self and all of the taivos that we have to overcome and all of the laziness that we have to fight against and all of the giyas habasar that we have to engage in and all of the work of bechira that we have to engage in. That's the territory of the Yetzer Hara. That's the choshech hakaful u'mechupel. The world of Bina, Rebbe Nachman, not only did Rebbe Nachman not want to ignore the Yetzer Hara, Rebbe Nachman said, my Iker Zach is to rectify the Yetzer Hara. The Iker thing of a tzaddik of Bina for Rabbeinu is to go down into the territory of the Yetzer Hara, to descend down into the constriction of self, into the Levushe HaNefesh, which is the heart that is a split thing with the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, a Malach Ra and a Malach Tov that are perpetually in battle with one another. And to send down into that place where Yid has to work on themselves and elevate themselves and transform the Yetzer Hara into a Malach Tov, to reveal that the Yetzer Hara is not only an enemy, is not only not an enemy, but rather if we can tame the Yetzer and we can uncover the light that the Yetzer Hara has for us, then we'll be able to come back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a doubled portion. Not only are we able to find you in the Yetzer HaTov, which is not such a chiddush, but we're able to find you in the Yetzer Hara itself. This is the secret of what Chazal say, that Tov ze Yetzer HaTov, Tov Ma'od ze Yetzer Hara. That the Tov, the plain goodness, is the goodness of Chokhmah that doesn't face any constriction or concealment, and therefore it remains the goodness that it is. It doesn't acknowledge any reality of bad, and therefore there's no bad to overcome to reveal an even greater level of goodness. There's no Odio Ter Tov, there's just Tov. But the secret of Tov Ma'od, which is the descent down into the territory of the Yetzer Hara, is the ability to reveal how goodness is even greater than it appeared to be at the beginning. Ma'od is the deepening power of something as a result of it facing a restriction against itself. And in order to overcome that restriction, it's forced to uncover hitherto unrevealed strengths from within itself to reveal how it can overpower the constriction. So the Tov is good, but that's without any constriction. The Tov Ma'od is when the Tov encounters the territory of concealment and it reveals that we can overcome it to be mitgaber over the Yetzer and transform the Yetzer Hara into the Shalhuven Dirachimu, into the flames of love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu awakens within our soul to yearn upwards towards Him with all of our intensity and all of our fervor. The Chadvasa, the Shmaisa, the ability to fight for the sake of revealing Torah, the ability to descend down into the details and the pratim, that's the territory of the Yetzer Hara. And when we can conquer the territory of the Yetzer Hara, and we can force the Malach Ra to say Amen Bal Korcho like we do on Friday night, when we drag our bodies into the territory of Kedusha, well then there's going to be a profound revelation of the Or Mufla Remala of Keser that contains both Chokhmah and Binah together. So for the Shpoler Zeide, there was a denial, a fight against the Yetzer Hara, to deny its existence, no interest in entering into any conversation with it. Only work on Panimius Malchus, which is the Nakuda of Emuna Tahira that rests at the core of each and every Yid, no matter where they find themselves. Mum Ein Bach. The Shpoler Zeide was always helping the Pashat Yidden. He was always helping to bring Nisim to Pashat Yidden, where all that was revealed was that innermost point of Malchus. Rabbeinu, on the other hand, he says, Achein atem anashim ksherim aval lo lezos hayta kavanasi. Ratzishi tatiyu kechayos hanehamos bayar. I don't want the simple folks, says Rebbe Nachman. I want those people who are able to go into the forest at night and fight and scream for HaKadosh Baruch Hu like animals in the forest, like beasts of the forest, to encounter the Yetzer Hara and to transform it into a place of a Giloi Mufla Remala. And this is what we see very much in the Torah of Rebbe Nachman. Rebbe Nachman speaks so often about the necessity of transforming all of the manios, all of the struggles, all of the constriction, all of the atzvus, all of the tendency towards yeyush, and to force them to become part and parcel of the spiritual revelation, where when we overcome yeyush, and when we overcome sadness, and when we overcome despondency, and we overcome laziness, and we overcome all of the difficult parts, we reveal an even greater light for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ad kedei kach that Rabbi Nachman himself says in Torah Ayin Beis that the Yetzer Hara is not simply something that the Jewish people have, but the Yetzer Hara is something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has as well. The Tzimtzum, the Koyach of Bina that reveals itself in this world, can be considered the Yetzer Hara of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol, that desire to reveal himself more and more. So it turns out that for Rebbe Nachman, it's not just that we're not undoing the Yetzer Hara and ignoring the Yetzer Hara, but rather we're entering into the territory of the Yetzer Hara because the Ikar Avoida of Bina is to be Magala, the Chitzonius of Malchus, which is how the Yetzer Hara itself is part and parcel of the place where we find HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. this comes out into the clearest vision when we see that what Rebbe Nachman did was he didn't want to destroy the Yetzer Hara. Rebbe Nachman wanted to conquer the Yetzer Hara. Rebbe Nachman was aware that he could not destroy the Yetzer Hara. The infantile perspective of Chokhmah without a relationship with Binah believes that it has the ability to undo the Yetzer Hara and to only operate in a realm of goodness and revealed light. But Bina has the mature perspective of the fact that there is no perfection and there is no possibility of overcoming the human condition, meaning to say there is no beating the Yetzer Hara. There's only transforming the Yetzer Hara into forcing it to work for us. And this was the avodah of Rebbe Nachman. The avodah of Rebbe Nachman was to go beyond all of the different names of the Yetzer Hara. Chazal give us 7 names for the Yetzer Hara. And all of those names are missing the point because the Yetzer Hara can reveal itself in many, many different ways. And as long as a tzaddik is coming along to say, oh, this is the name of the Yetzer Hara, or that's the name of the Yetzer Hara is not too worried because the Yetzer Hara knows that no matter what name you call me, I could just uncover another name. That's why when Yaakov Avinu had a hisayrus to uncover the true source of the Yetzer Hara, which would have brought about the true tikkun hashalim, so he says, what Rabbi Nachman says, what Yaakov Avinu says is, what is your name? He asks the Yetzer Hara its name. Yaakov Avinu says, "What's your name?" And the Yetzer Hara, the Sarashal Esav, which is the shorish of the Gevuros, the shorish of the Tzimtzum, the shorish of Bina, which is the Yetzer, it says, "Lama Tishalet Shmi." It's not time yet to uncover my essential name. The Yetzer Hara has unessential names and the essential name. All of the different iterations of the Yetzer Hara are inessential names. We can call the Yetzer Hara lust. We can call the Yetzer Hara rage. We can call the Yetzer Hara hunger. We can call the Yetzer Hara anger. We can call the Yetzer Hara all different things, but all of those are just symptoms of the Yetzer. They're not the Yetzer in and of itself. And as long as a human being is simply fighting a symptom of the Yetzer Hara is not worried about its job being done. Because the ultimate purpose of the Yetzer Hara is for it to be transformed into a Malach Tov. But as long as all we're grasping at is the externalization and the symptoms of the Yetzer Hara, so then we haven't done anything to make the Yetzer Hara frightened that its time has come up. And at that time, it wasn't time yet. So Yaakov Avinu's desire to know the true name of the Yetzer Hara is met with, don't ask me my name yet. It's not time for that. Rebbe Nachman describes, and as we're going to see, this is fundamentally connected to the story of the spider and the fly, which is all about the relationship between the Shpoler Zeide and Rebbe Nachman, which is how we'll end this series of Shirim, that the entire story is ultimately all about transforming the Yetzer Hara and revealing the true source of the Yetzer Hara and elevating the Yetzer Hara back up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and showing how by way of the Yetzer Hara itself, we have the ability of doubling the space in which you can reveal yourself. And Rabbi Nachman says that they gave 7 names to the Yetzer Hara, but if it were up to me, I would give an 8th name to the Yetzer Hara. Meaning to say that Rabbi Nachman was no longer stuck in the 7 symptoms of the Yetzer Hara, but he, on a certain level, uncovered the essential nature of the Yetzer Hara. And the essential nature of the Yetzer Hara is that point at which we have the ability of transforming the Yetzer Hara and uncovering its true potency, which is revealing its light and allowing it to become a vessel for Avodas Hashem. And obviously, the Yetzer Hara doesn't want that, because if we can uncover the true name of the Yetzer Hara, well, then the gig is up, and the Yetzer is going to be revealed to be nothing other than a powerful expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light, which is why the Hisnagdus came about against Rabbi Nachman. But ultimately, Rabbi Nachman said, I want to give an 8th name to the Yetzer Hara, and that 8th name is the Koyach HaMedama, the potency of imagination, the strength of imagination. The strength of imagination, of assumptions, of expectations, and imagined craving, as Rabbeinu describes in Sichos Aran, that the Yetzer Hara is like a fiendish individual running through the shuk with his hands and his fist closed, and each and every person who sees that closed fist of the Yetzer Hara is immediately feeling that, oh, it has exactly what I need. It has the answer to all of the problems that I individually feel. And there's nothing else in the world that's going to give the answer. And we chase it and we chase it and we chase it until we corner it. And when the Yetzer Hara opens up its hands, it shows that there's poof, nothing there. That koyach hamedama, that koyach of imagination, the imagination that we have, or the fantasies that we fall into in the hopes that there's something that can make my life feel perfect. When we're able to transform that koyach hamedama, which is the true root of the Yetzer Hara, into kedusha, which is the shorish of lamdus and davening and hispoidus and dimyon de kedusha and rocha kodesh and nevuah and all of the illumination that comes about by way of the expanding territory of faith within the mind that finds itself needing to find God in darkness over and over again, the light of God that's going to come about by way of the imagination, biyad ha-nevi'im adameh, is the true transformation of all things. That's what brings Bina all the way back up to Keser, to reveal the light of Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah from within the dreamlike space of Bina and the Yetzer Hara. And so Rebbe Nachman came not only to fight the Yetzer Hara, but to transform the Yetzer Hara into a Malach Tov, to reveal how Bina itself and the vessels of this worldliness are not the opposite of godliness, but rather it's the very territory in which we're able to reveal the true potency of godliness. Because it's one thing to reveal through Chokhmah the panemius of Malchus without any Yetzer Hara, and to deny the reality of Yetzer Hara. But it's another thing altogether to descend down, 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 deep, deep, deep into the territories of constriction and concealment and reveal how the Yetzer Hara itself is in truth just a messenger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which is why Rebbe Nachman was not drawing down Nisim, and Rebbe Nachman was not bemoaning the fact that there was the Yetzer Hara. He was giving us eitzos as to how to transform the Yetzer Hara, how to confront the Yetzer Hara, how to uncover the spiritual strength needed to encounter a life that is split between a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara, and the courage and the confidence and the spiritual strength to get up over and over again, even after we feel that we've lost the battle with the Yetzer Hara, and to overcome despondency and to overcome the yeyush that comes with feeling that we're beat by the Yetzer Hara, but to face it and to gaze at it and to send down deep into it so that we can transform it into the rightful place that it is, which is the awakening of biyad ha-nevi'im adameh. That it's only by way of the Yetzer Hara that we have the ability to uncover HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. Without the Yetzer Hara, all we would have is the pure potency of light, which is not pleasurable. Rabbi Nachman was digging down deep into the Gullus experience itself and saying that this is where we're going to find the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because when we can schlep Bina all the way back up to Chokhmah, then we have the ability of taking Chokhmah back to an even higher place, which is the Pnimius of Chokhmah, which is the Pnimius of Atik, which is the secret of Keser, which is the secret of Reshad Lo Asyada, which is the secret of the Schleik Na'ah, that wondrous laughter that's going to emerge when we uncover the peace between these two tzaddikim. We see, just like the Shpoler Zeide wanted to undo Kinos, we see that Rebbe Nachman speaks of the value of Kinos, that Kinos ultimately are just a tikkun without the nun. That tikkun represents the ability to rectify concealment, to rectify constriction, to move through the darkness, to move through the elements that seem to blot out the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tikkun is what we do when we rectify broken things. But when we can't do it properly, so then we fall into the opposite, which is kinos. Kinos is the same letters of tikkun. It means when we get stuck within that territory of lament where we cannot break free from the constriction, we can't seem to spark the light for long enough to give us the confidence to continue to believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the way that we know that we need to. And from within that very territory of the kinos themselves, we have the ability to awaken the possibility of uncovering the truest form of tikkun. Because now, when we're missing the nun, when we don't have that full nun shari bina, that capacity to transform the Yetzer Hara into a malach, to transform the kinos into a place of praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu within the exile and draw that exile into redemption itself. So then we're left with tikkun without a nun, which is teku, which are unanswerable questions. The process of being stuck within the territory of Chitzonius HaMalchus, and the Heichal HaGavanim HaMishtanim, the changing chambers of colors, and this place that very often looks like Gehenna, as Rebbe Nachman says. But when we have the ability of uncovering from within that teku, the capacity of kinos, to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu and sing out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from within the concealment, then we have the ability of rectifying things properly. So we see that this differentiation between the Shpoler Zeide and Rebbe Nachman, the Chokhmah and the Binah, the lack of acknowledgement of the Yetzer Hara, because all it wants to look at is the absolute goodness of the Yid, versus the constriction of the Yetzer Hara, which is enabling the Yid to uncover more and more within themselves that Koyach HaMedameh, that possibility of imagination, that possibility of prophecy, that possibility of uncovering new unfolded levels of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. That comes about by way of Bina itself. That comes about specifically from within a Churban, not denying the Churban, not wanting to say Kinos, but specifically going down into Kinos itself. This split between these two tzaddikim is ultimately, like we said, fundamentally rooted in a singular thing. Because it's only when we can unify the perspective of Chokhmah and the perspective of Bina, the perspective of not having a Yetzer Hara and the perspective of the Yetzer Hara, that we have the ability of rectifying Pnimius and Chitzonius HaMalchus, which brings us to something very interesting. One of the places that we see that there was a deep respect for both tzaddikim was the Heilige Rishner. The Heilige Rishner represents Malchus. We know we've spoken about Rabbi Yisrael of Rizhin. We've spoken about the Malchus of the bias of Rizhin, which was the royalty. It was the Malchus of David HaMelech that was awakening again. And Malchus understands that whenever there's a machlokas between Abba and Ima, between Chokhmah and Binah, so it's not really a machlokas, but ultimately it's there because both parts are revealing two elements of a singular whole, and that it's only from within that contradiction and that distortion that the full picture can emerge, which can give us a little bit of an insight into a wondrous story. That there was an individual who came to came to the Rizhiner Rebbe with a kvittel, and the Rizhiner read his kvittel, and he said, "I don't understand. Either ask me for a child, or ask for help for your children to give you nachas. But to ask for neither of them, I'm confused." And he said that my grandfather was born, and Rebbe Nachman was his sandik. And at the bris, Rebbe Nachman said that there would be no children that were to come from future generations. And he said, so therefore, I'm not even asking. And what the Rishner said, he says, if Rebbe Nachman said that there were no children to come out of this family, then the Shpoler Zeide said that there were children to come out of this family, and I paskin like the Shpoler Zeide. The Rishner's capacity to understand that if Rabbi Nachman said one thing, the Shpoler Zeide said the other thing, and that if the Shpoler Zeide said one thing, then Rabbi Nachman said the other thing, is a deep understanding as to the core of the machlokas, because a typical machlokas is about something specific, which might lead us to think that there's an actual opposition going on in terms of some particular element. But the baseline assumption that if one said this, then one said the other, is the deep recognition of how it's from within the oppositional dynamics of these two separate elements that the full unity is going to take shape. That they are both representative of two sides of the same coin. If Chokhmah says this, Binah says this, and if Binah said that, then Chokhmah said that, and that gives the Rishner the ability to paskin like the Shpoler Zeide. And it's Dafka the Rishner, Dafka the light of Malchus, that has the ability to understand that the entire argument between Chokhmah and Binah is all about the two parts of Malchus itself, the two parts of the Levana, the two parts of what it means to be a Yid in this world, which is Pnimius HaMalchus and Chitzonius HaMalchus. So we see how this entire machlokas reveals itself at the core of how we relate to Malchus. How do we engage what it means to be a human being in this world? The Shpoler Zeide's avoida was to stay in Himmel, to stay in Shemayim. He didn't want to come down, like we said. He didn't want to come down into this world. Rebbe Nachman, on the other hand, Dafka wanted to come down into this world. Dafka wanted to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu from within this world. He wanted to transform the Yetzer Hara, the Koyach HaMedameh, into a place of true refinement. One of the things that Rebbe Nachman said about the Shpoler Zeide is that the Shpoler Zeide was Yehuda Leib, and Leib means lion. And the Rebbe Nachman would always refer to the Shpoler Zeide as a lion. He would refer to the Shpoler Zeide as a lion. And he says, we typically say that it's better for a person to throw themselves into a den of lions than it is to fall in the hands of their enemy. But what should I do now that my enemy himself is the lion himself, the Shpoler Zeide, the lion? So Rebbe Nachman referred to the Shpoler Zeide as a lion. And the fierceness of the lion is its ability to chew and to break down things. But there's a very, very unique thing revealed by Rebbe Nachman about the Shpoler Zeide. That when Rebbe Nachman and the Shpoler Zeide met in order to try and bring shalom, so the Shpoler Zeide said, "Are you afraid of an old man like this?" And he took Rebbe Nachman's finger and he put it in his mouth and he showed him that he had no teeth. And it was known that the Shpoler Zeide didn't have teeth at the time that he was engaged in his battle with Rebbe Nachman. Aryeh represents Chokhmah. The Aryeh represents the light of Chokhmah, the light of illumination, the strength of illumination. The Aryeh Ilah, which is found on the Merkava. The Leshem Shmuel Chaloma asks, how can we have an impure animal that's going to be on the Merkava? But in truth, the highest source of the Aryeh, the Melech of all of the behemoths, the Melech of all of the animals, is the Aryeh in its Kedusha. That light of the Aryeh, that strength of Chokhmah. The teeth of the Aryeh, the ability for the Aryeh to have teeth, is the ability for the Aryeh to chew something down. And what Rebbe Nachman was being shown is that the Shpoler Zeide was a lion without teeth, a lion without teeth. And this becomes far more fundamental when we go into the story of the spider and the fly, when we talk about the mountains of teeth that prevent the men of Chokhmah from ascending the mountain of Binah. But to go deep for a second, the teeth are referred to as the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah. The 32 teeth that an individual has are the in-between that represent the ability to grind down whole ideas and to draw them down into particularized points so that they can be processed. Just like the teeth allow us to chew our food and to take something whole and to break it down into parts so that they can be digestible, so too the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah in Kedusha are the intermediary, the interface between Chokhmah and Binah. Chokhmah is clarity. Chokhmah is unified light. Binah is the territory of differentiation. The transitional space between purified light and the realm of differentiation are the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah. What are the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah? So the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah, we know, spell out Lev. Binah is the heart. Chokhmah is the mind and Binah is the heart. But Chokhmah needs to have within itself the capacity of revealing itself later on in the realm of Binah. Because like we said, the entire journey from Eretz Yisrael was not just the opposition of Binah to Chokhmah, but rather the uncovering of the potency of Binah from within Chokhmah itself so that Binah can go down and allow Chokhmah to reveal itself in its true form, which is with all of the details of Binah, so that when we go back up, we don't just go back up to the regular Chokhmah, but we go back up to Pnimius Chokhmah, Pnimius Atik, which is the secret of Reish Loas Yada, which is the unity of the Klal and the Prat together. This secret of the potentiation towards differentiation that exists even within the realm of Chokhmah itself is the lave within Chokhmah, is the potency of Binah within Chokhmah prior to its externalization, in the secret of Havein b'Chokhmah, that there's the potency of understanding within Chokhmah itself, and this is referred to as the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah. These Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah correspond to the 32 teeth that the individual has. As the Arizal explains, that the Kavana of Achila is that when we have an aleph represents Chokhmah, or it can represent Binah as well, aleph Chokhmah, aleph Binah, and that aleph appears to be a vav, a yud, and a yud, which is the gematria of 26. But what happens when you split the aleph? When you split the aleph and you open up that air, that lavoniut, that purified air, and that avir kadosh within the aleph, now you have a vav yud and a vav yud. That's 16, which are the upper 16 teeth and the lower 16 teeth, which is the process of grinding down Chokhmah to reveal the light of Binah within it, and the ability to reveal the light of Chokhmah within Binah itself. These Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah, the koyach of Achila, the koyach of the teeth, represent that transitionary point where it becomes fundamentally clear that in truth there's no machlokas between Chokhmah and Binah, because ultimately the entire tachlis of Binah is to reveal itself from within the inner recesses of Chokhmah, to descend down into the territory of constriction where it appears to be operating in its own, and then to ascend upwards afterwards back into Chokhmah so that it can then go back up into Keser to reveal the Keser Elyon Alav Nikra of the Schok Na'a of that profound Shalom. So that's what the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah are. That's what the teeth are. So typically, the Aryeh has teeth, and the Aryeh is able to do both. But what the Shpoler Zeide was showing Rebbe Nachman, he says, do you think this is a machlokas? Because in truth, I don't have teeth. I don't have the ability to grind down Chokhmah into Binah. I don't have the ability to uncover that Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah. But you, Rebbe Nachman, are the Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah. You, Rebbe Nachman, are the teeth of the lion. You, Rebbe Nachman, are the Hamshacha of Chokhmah into the territory of Binah so that it can then ascend upwards again and reveal itself in the lens of Keser. This is the secret of the teeth of the Aryeh, that the Shpoler Zeide is the lion without teeth, and Rebbe Nachman is the teeth of that lion. The Lamed Beis Nesivos Chokhmah from within the recesses of Chokhmah that allow Chokhmah to be ground down into the territory of Binah and to ascend upwards afterwards to reveal themselves in the secret of Keser. And so we see that not only was it not a machlokas, but it was a process of uncovering. It was a shlemus, that Rebbe Nachman's entire tachlis, as the tzaddik on the level of Bina, was to descend down and schlep the realm of unity, the realm of the Shpoler Zeida's light, into the territories of constriction, into the territories of concealment, in order to ascend upwards afterwards to reveal how both nothingness and somethingness are revelatory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Both the unified whole and the processed details are revelatory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. And this unity is ultimately the unity that's going to bring about the unity of Chokhmah and Binah, Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. We see, however, that there's always going to be interchanging parts here. There's always going to be interchanging parts. That the Shpoler Zeide had the ability to descend down into the territory of Bina when he needed to. Because even though the Shpoler Zeide represents Chokhmah, which represents the light of Mashiach ben David, which represents David HaMelech, who's able to say that everything is going to be good and everything is going to be revealed as unified in the end of the day, which is the light of the Maharal, which is the light of that secret of Mashiach ben David. And Rebbe Nachman represents Mashiach ben Yosef, which is the process and going down into constriction and going down into concealment and going down into the territories in this world. But we know that even though it appears to be a machlokas between Yehuda and Yosef, even though it appears to be a machlokas between Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, nevertheless, there's a mutual bond between the two of them. And that there are times where Mashiach ben Yosef is going to find himself thrown into a pit, where Mashiach ben Yosef finds himself stuck in concealment because the territories of Bina and the territories of constriction can become a very difficult place to be. And it's a place where a person can fall into the Yetzer, and it's a place where a person can fall into all sorts of constriction, just like Yosef HaTzadik in Mitzrayim, where he had to battle against Eichas Potiphar, and he had to utilize the koyach of Biad HaNeviim Adama to see the light of Yaakov Avinu. He had to enter into that koyach of the Yetzer Hara in order to rectify it from within Mitzrayim itself. Mashiach ben David represents the illumination of David Malka Mashiach, the Bara de David, which is the place of Chokhmah. But we know that Yehuda goes back to the bore. Yehuda goes back to try and save Yosef HaTzadik that was thrown into the bore. That we know that Mashiach ben David processes and tries to save Mashiach ben Yosef, as we know from the Arizal, and it's brought down in Pri Etz Chaim and Shar Kavanos by Ulam Alshinim, that the Arizal went to the Kvarim of Shmaya v'Avtalia through Rav Chaim Vital, and he said, we have to daven very well that Mashiach ben Yosef should be saved from the hands of Armelis Harasha, and Mashiach ben Yosef can fall into threats and fall into stuckness, and ultimately the Arizal, who is the element of Mashiach ben Yosef, was nifter before his time. And so we see that there's a call for Mashiach ben David to always go and protect Mashiach ben Yosef. We see this in Rebbe Nachman stories as well. And so this is how I want to try and understand a little bit. We're just not going into the depth of the details here, but a unique story that we find in the life of the Shpoler Zeide, which reveals a profound element of the light of the Shpoler Zeide, which is that prior to the Shpoler Zeide being revealed as a tzaddik, the Shpoler Zeide was in the process of Elu Ma'asos B'nai Yisrael, that the tzaddikim went into Galus, and the process of the tzaddikim in Galus was to rectify what they needed to rectify and to do the tikkunim that they needed to do. And on these journeys, the Shpoler Zeide was zocheh to Gilui Eliyahu very often. And one time, Eliyahu Navi came and said, Shpoler Zeide, I have a mission for you. And it's always Eliyahu Navi who brings about the unity between the two Mashiachs, between Mashiach ben David and between Mashiach ben Yosef. Says, I have a mission for you. There's a Yid who owed money to a non-Jew, to a Paritz. And this Paritz is so evil to the Jewish people that because this Jew couldn't pay him back, he threw this Jew into a dungeon. He threw this Jew into a pit in the ground. And he was going to give this Jew a choice. He says, either figure out how to pay, face the consequences, or outdance me. If you could outdance me, says this guy to the Jew who's finding himself stuck in this pit, then you'll get free with your life and the life of your family. The only issue is this Cossack was a trained dancer, and this Jew had been starving for 2 or 3 days in this pit, and not only that, but when he was going to come up and dance against this guy, against this Cossack, he was going to have to wear a bear costume. So all of these mitigating factors against this Jew stuck in the pit, which is the element of Mashiach ben Yosef, who finds himself stuck in concealment, is that the Cossack is going to have the ability to kill him. Eliyahu Navi comes to the Shpoler Zeide, and he says, you have to take his place, and you have to outdance this Cossack. And the Shpoler Zeide says, fine, no problem. Mashiach ben David always wants to protect Mashiach ben Yosef. The only issue is I don't know how to dance. I don't know how to dance. Eliyahu Navi teaches the Shpoler Zeide the next few nights how to dance. And under the cover of night, he goes into this pit, and he changes places with this emaciated Jew, and he puts on the bear costume, and this Jew escapes under the cover of night. And so that when this Cossack comes to outdance this Jew to death, this Jew of Mashiach ben Yosef, who's now really the Shpoler Zeide, the light of Mashiach ben David, he's expecting that this weak Jew is going to die. But having learned the dancing from Eliyahu Navi, not only is the Shpoler Zeide able to keep up with this Cossack, but he's able to outdance the Cossack, and he's able to embarrass the Cossack, and he's able to destroy the Cossack by way of his dancing, to the degree that the song of Hop comes out to be this redemptive song of a dancing, a powerful dancing of Mashiach ben David and a redemption over our enemies. So in this secret story, we find that in truth, even though b'derech klal, there's an apparent machlokas between these two tzaddikim, nevertheless, the hidden bonds of love appear, and that Mashiach ben David, the light of Chokhmah, is still willing to descend down into the territories of Binah and to give the boost when the boost needs to be there. Because Binah doesn't operate on its own in the realms of concealment. Binah understands its shlichus from Chokhmah. That's the power of Rebbe Nachman. Avada, the Shpoler Zeide is right. It's a dangerous thing for a tzaddik to go down into Bina. It's a dangerous thing for a person to find themselves in the realms of constriction in this world. That's why it takes a tzaddik and ish pella like Rebbe Nachman to understand that I can descend down into all of the particularities. I can go down into all of the constriction, all of the concealment, and still maintain the bittul muchletas of Chokhmah. That I'm not going to forget Chokhmah. That's what Rebbe Nachman reveals. The fear of the Shpoler Zeide is that Bina is going to forget Chokhmah. Bina understands that I'm never going to forget Chokhmah because I'm just an extension of Chokhmah, and my mission is to reveal the inner interiority of Chokhmah, which is the light of Keser. And so we see that even the Shpoler Zeide had this ability of going down and saving Bina because Bina always remains connected to Chokhmah as well. And this dancing of the Shpoler Zeide carries itself with the Shpoler Zeide throughout his life. That on Friday nights, when the Shpoler Zeide did become a Rebbe and became a beautiful Rebbe and a Rebbe world-renowned, that the tzaddikim would travel. They would travel to watch the Shpoler Zeide's dancing on Friday night. Friday night, that point of the transition where the week of Bina kisses the light of Shabbos, which is Chokhmah, the reunification of Bina within Chokhmah, that place of dancing, that place of the true Rikud, of the revelation, how all of the constriction is ultimately just revelatory of a further light. On that Friday night, that's when the Shpoler Zeide would be dancing. And the dancing of the Shpoler Zeide was a dancing that was unlike anything else. It was unlike anything else. There was no dancing of the tzaddikim that was known. I asked the Rebbe Shlita once if it could be that the Shpoler Zeide is ultimately the secret of the legless beggar who's going to teach the world how to dance like David HaMelech. And he said could be. It wasn't a convincing argument, but I'm still convinced that there's a certain element to it. That ultimately this dancing of the Shpoler Zeide is the unification of Chokhmah and Binah. Especially on Friday night, as the Rebbe says, that Friday night is a transition point from the Bina of the week and the constriction of the week, and the drawing all of that constriction into illumination. So again, we see the bonds of love and the cords of connectivity that exist between these two train ray and Delemus Parshan. Chokhmah and Binah never separate. Malchus understands this. The only question is when we're watching the motion, when we're watching the picture in motion, when we're watching it in its process, it appears that there's an apparent machlokas because that's the only way that Batisha is going to be able to take place. Something we didn't say last week is that Shpoler Zeide didn't want to come down here because Chokhmah doesn't want to come down until he saw a man with an iron shovel or an iron hoe on his shoulder. And he looks at him and he says, "Younger man, you're still up here? Come down, there's work to do." Later on, after the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh came to the Shpoler Zeide's bris and said that he was going to be like Avram Avinu, there was another time, one of the Rebbeim of the Shpoler Zeide was the Heiliger of Pinchas Karitzer. And the Heiliger of Pinchas Karitzer brought the Shpoler Zeide when he had a question as to whether he should take a role of Shchita in a certain town or not. So the Rav Pinchas Karitzer brought the Shpoler Zeide to the Baal Shem Tov. Upon entering into the room of the Baal Shem Tov, the Shpoler Zeide said, "It's you, the man with the shovel," and he fainted. And when he awoke, he told the story. He said, "This soul that I saw in Shemayim, who told me that I had to come down here, that was the Heilige Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh." In that encounter, the Baal Shem Tov said to the Shpoler Zeide, he says, "I had thought that you had done more by now, but there's still time for you to do more." And the Shpoler Zeide got a bracha from the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, where he said that every place that your feet land, you should stand firmly upon the ground. So many years later, when people would ask the Shpoler Zeide how he was able to dance like the legless beggar of the future, how he was able to dance like a malach in between Shemayim and Aretz, specifically on Friday night, that point of collision between Bina of the week and the Chokhmah of Shabbos, that Chakal Tapuchin Kadishin. So the Shpoler Zeide gave two answers. He says that I learned the secret of dancing from the Heilige Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, and I learned how to dance from Eliyahu Hanavi. The secret of dancing is wherever my feet land, they should be firmly implanted upon the ground. And the moves that I received were from Eliyahu Hanavi. And so we see the dancing of the Shpoler Zeide and the future dance of the legless beggar are both fundamentally connected to one another, at least in theory, because the secret of Malchus being revealed to be the highest place can only come about by way of schlepping all of the constriction back up up to illumination. And when we can transform all of the weight of our legs and all of the weight of the heaviness of this world, which is the territory of Bina, which very often feels like Gehenna, that territory of Rebbe Nachman, where a person has to be mitchazik themselves every second, al tet yayish, not to lose hope, not to give up, etc., has to go all the way back up to the territory of Chokhmah, which is the calmness of Chokhmah, which is the beauty of Chokhmah, which is the unity of Chokhmah, and they both have to dance together. That's the unified dance of Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. That's the illumination of Moshe Rabbeinu, who's kol al train Mashiachin. Chokhmah alone is tainug tmidi eno tainug, the Baal Shem Tov tells us. It's a perpetual pleasure that's not pleasurable. When it reveals itself to be fundamentally pleasurable, it grows boring. Only Bina is the descent into the chamber of changing colors, which is the momentary descent away from pleasure in order to awaken a newfound expression of pleasure that allows that tainug tmidi, that perpetual pleasure, to reveal itself with intensification and reunification over and over. And that's what's taking place in the unity of the Shpoler Zeide and Rabbeinu. Be'ezras Hashem, we're going to continue with one more shir, I believe, about elements of a Malchut, and then we're going to go full in to the spider and the fly, which is going to reveal to us how this unfolds in the clear narrative and the story of Rabbeinu, Be'ezras Hashem.